Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second Ellechat of the day on the ins and outs of creating a one-of-a-kind logo. Thank you for those of you who jumped over from the last webinar. Glad that you joined me. And for those of you who are tuning in just for the logo portion of today's Elchats, I'm glad that you're here too. Feel free to say hello in the comments. I would love to see who is tuning in today. Just see you back in here, Christina and Aaron and Sandra Maria. Talking a lot about branding today, and so this one's going to be a lot of fun as well. Love inspiration boards. Have to say, love creating logos even more. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for joining in today. For those of you who maybe didn't jump over from last Elchat, just to show you around the window, comment section, looks like you all found it, and then the question section right underneath here. I don't have any polls today, but feel free to ask questions there. I'll try to answer as many as I can after I go through the content today. So feel free to drop them in there. And you can also vote up questions. So if you want to see a question answered really badly, go ahead and give it a vote, because I'm going to answer the questions in order of the number of votes. So we are going to move right into the content, since we only have 45 minutes today, and talk about the ins and outs of creating a one-of-a-kind logo. I've been doing a brand challenge throughout the month of February to try to help you all streamline your brand. We're still towards the beginning of 2017, and I thought it might be helpful to just reevaluate your brand, starting with laying the groundwork of your mission statement, ideal client, brand keywords, moving all the way through logo design, choosing colors, and then all the way to icons and patterns as well. So we're on day 14, which is hard to believe, out of 20 days. And we just covered logos a couple days ago, but if you're still struggling with creating a one-of-a-kind logo, a distinct logo, if you're not sure that your logo is 100% there yet, or you just want to make sure that you're on the right track, this is a good place to be. So I'm going to talk all about it over these next few minutes. So let's jump right in. Our agenda, what we're going to cover first is the 5 characteristics of iconic logos. What makes a good logo? What should you be aiming for? Second is my own process for creating custom logos. I've worked with 40 plus clients over the last 3 years. It's been a lot of fun. Logo design is one of my favorite parts of the branding process. And so I'm going to share exactly what I've learned and any secrets I might have for this process. And then we'll cover some do's and don'ts of logo design as well. All right, so 5 characteristics of iconic logos. The first is simplicity. A simple approach makes a logo more versatile and easier to remember. I remember in college, one of my professors, design professors, said, if you are able to draw a logo from memory, it is an iconic logo. So if I ask you to draw the McDonald's logo, you could easily draw those arches. And so that lends itself to simplicity. If your logo is really detailed and not very simple, it's going to be hard for someone to be able to draw it. And to remember it, actually. The simpler it is, the easier it is to remember. So consider simplicity. Don't go nuts with the details. Just choose one detail that will help it stand out, which I'll talk about in a second, and just keep it simple. That KISS formula, keep it simple, stupid. You're not stupid, but keep it simple. And a great example of this is the logo for the Food Writers Guild. So if you look at it, it looks like a calligraphy nib. But then you look in the negative space and it's a little spoon. I just think it is so clever and it's so simple. You think, why didn't I think of that already? That makes a really great logo. This is one of my favorites of all time. I just think it's really clever. And it's a great example of using negative space in a design, not just thinking about this, this space right here, the little nib, but also thinking about that negative space. So I thought this one was so clever. But keep your logo simple. Number 2 is relevance. Your logo should be relevant to your industry and appeal to your ideal audience. So for example, These two logos are for two totally different industries. Kate Spade is fashion for women, and ESPN deals with sports and tries to appeal more to men. So you can see the styles are two totally different styles. Kate Spade is feminine, classy. ESPN is bold, and it's even italicized to show kind of movement as well. So think about that. Is your logo, is it applicable to your industry? Would it make sense with what you do? So your logo needs to be relevant. Number 3 is that you need to consider tradition. Iconic logos don't just last for a year or two, they last for the duration of a business. They aren't necessarily trendy. And this can be hard. It can be hard not to go with the trends when you're creating your logo. But the mark of an iconic logo and a great logo is that it stands the test of time. If you think of brands, I think of Pepsi. If you looked at Pepsi's brand 50 years ago, it might look a little different. They've updated it since then, but only small tweaks throughout the years. Same thing with Coca-Cola. Nike has been the same for I don't know how long. So if you think of those brands, and the reason that this is important and the reason it's important not to switch up your logo all the time and rebrand is because of recognition. You want people to easily recognize your brand. And if you're switching it up all the time, people aren't going to be able to easily recognize your brand. So you should only be making small changes if you do choose to update and rebrand. So think about that. Is your logo going to be applicable for you 10 years from now? When I was designing the Ellen Company logo, I just tried to choose that simple serif font with the really pretty ampersand, and I was like, this is it. It's just simple, it's classic. I don't see myself switching it up for the next 10 years. This one's good to go. So keep that in mind as you're designing your logo. A great example of this, I just love this logo so much. Charleston Gourmet Burger Company, they probably say company. But this is a great look. It's just very classic. It isn't too trendy, and it will stick with them for years and years. So keep that in mind. Number 4 is distinction. Distinct logos have one feature that helps them stand out, just one. Nike, it's the check. Kate Spade, it was the cute little spade symbol. If you look at the most iconic logos, they don't have a ton going on. There's usually one feature that helps them stand out. And you do want it to help you stand out. You don't want it to be too plain. One of the great benefits of branding is that it can separate you from others in your industry. So consider that as you're creating your logo. Just choose one main thing to stick out, one main feature. Love this logo. I think it is so fun and so applicable, and I wish you could see all the different logo variations because the Great Catering Co. Lettering stays the same, but they have a different kind of food splatter for each one. But this food splatter, even though the typeface is beautiful for the text of their logo, the main feature that they chose to make their logo and their brand distinct are these food splatters, and I just think they are so fun. So keep that in mind. What is that one distinct element of your brand that helps it stand out? And you can get really creative. It can be a background image. I did a logo for the Bloom Workshop that uses a bee, but instead of filling it in with a color, we filled it in with an image of flowers, which made sense with the Bloom name. So keep that in mind. What's that one distinct feature that's going to help your logo stand out? And number 5 is scalability. We have a rule of thumb as graphic designers that if a logo is sized to 1 inch or smaller, that's supposed to say, it should maintain all of its detail. So your logo should look great blown up on a billboard, and it should look great on a pencil. It needs to be scalable. If it's too detailed, this goes right along with simplicity. If it's too detailed, then it's not going to scale very well, and you're not going to be able to read it if it's smaller or see all of the logo if it gets smaller. So an example of this, I think it's Moxum is how you say it. It looks like a little fox, but also kind of like a little diamond here. And you can see that it looks great blown up on a bag, but it also looks great really small on this business card, as it looks like. So think about that. It needs to be simple enough and scalable enough to be all different sizes. So those are the 5 characteristics of an iconic logo to keep in mind as you're designing your logo. But how do you go about designing a logo in the first place? I've got you covered. I'm sharing my process for what it's worth. Number 1 is to start with inspiration. I just covered in the last Ellechat today an inspiration board. If you didn't see that one, I'd highly recommend that you go back and watch the replay. I'll share the link in just a moment. But start with inspiration. Start with a visual starting point. And this comes in handy. Here's the inspiration board that we started with for my client, Bullis Photography. And we pulled from the elements of this board to create this logo right here. So start here. Start with some visual inspiration. Create a Pinterest board. Look for commonalities among the images that you pin to that board, and then you can go from there. But have a visual starting point for your brand and for your logo. Number 2 is to sketch out ideas for the layout of your logo. Don't skip over sketching. Even if you don't consider yourself to be an artist or a designer, some of the best graphic designers don't have very good motor skills when it comes to drawing on paper. I don't necessarily love sketching because I'm a perfectionist and I can't get everything just right, but it's helpful just to get your ideas down on paper and to fill up a whole page with ideas. Ideas that you think might be silly or wouldn't work, you might come back to and go, oh, that could actually work. Or you could combine it with another idea that you write down, but you don't have to be an artist to sketch. So here's an example. I shared this in the last Ellechat as well of my sketchbook. And I just sit there and I have the inspiration board always at the ready, always by my side. I usually print it out or have it up on my phone or my iPad and shut down my computer. And I just sit there with my sketch pad and sketch out ideas. And I usually look off of the inspiration board to see what shapes are on there. There was some architecture in Amanda's inspiration board, and that's where I pulled this shape right here. We didn't end up using it, but it came in handy when I was just trying to come up with ideas. She had a lot of leaves in her inspiration board, and so you can see I try to use them at the end of this letter form, even here in the frame around the A. And this is what the logo ended up looking like. But you can see just from these sketches where it kind of came from. I combined the J and the A of this sketch concept. So sketch them out. Use that inspiration board and pull from it. Come up with ideas. This is just a place for you to get your ideas down on paper. Nobody else has to see it. You don't have to snap a photo, share it to Instagram. You can keep it hidden in your sketchbook, but fill up a few pages. In design school, we had to come up with 300 sketches. It was crazy for one logo. And then we would go through and highlight contenders and narrow it down to 10 and digitize those concepts in Adobe Illustrator. And then we would narrow it down from there. And I know other graphic designers who do the same thing on their own. I don't do quite so many now, but I do try to fill up a few pages with concepts instead of going right into Illustrator and trying to design the logo in there. It never works out well. Number 3 is then after you've sketched out some ideas and chosen some contenders, usually at least 3 is what I say. And when you go in to digitize them, explore and customize fonts. So for example, I love to go on myfonts.com, and actually I might show that to you all in a second. Usually on font websites, they let you take fonts for a test drive, or you can go in and just see what characters will look like in that font. And so I will take the name of the business, or in this case, I was branding for an author, and I took her name and I just put it in my fonts and scrolled through the fonts to see what would be some good contenders based on the sketches that I came up with. And I landed, this is actually a font, it isn't hand lettering. And so I took a screenshot of the font just before purchasing it, just to see what it could look like in Adobe Illustrator and play around with it. So I took a screenshot, took it into Adobe Illustrator, and live traced it to play around with the letters and saw how it could fit. So I went in and added these swoops here, and I added these little leaves. But you can go and search for fonts that could work based on the composition of what you've sketched out in your sketchbook, and then play around with it using something like Adobe Illustrator to make it your own. So it's not just a regular font, but it's actually distinct and looks more intentional. Do I have permission to edit the font, Sadie asks? Yes. So when I just live trace it, that's mainly for my clients to see what it could look like. And if they approve it, then I go and purchase the font if we're going to use it. A lot of fonts, you need to go and check the usage rights. So go in and see, can you use this for a brand? How can you use it? And a lot of times on font websites, they'll have that right there ready to go for you. Even on free websites, see the terms of use for your fonts as well. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. You're welcome, Sadie. All right. And really, I feel bad even admitting that I take the snapshots, like take a screenshot of the font and do it that way, but I always go back and purchase it. So I just want to make sure I'm not paying hundreds of dollars for a font if I don't need to, if they're not going to go with that concept. All right, number 4 is to add that one-of-a-kind feature. So once you have the fonts in there, usually I love, like in Christina's brand, I love to play off of the fonts. In a lot of mine, even for Amanda Jameson's, adding something to the actual text. But just think about that one-of-a-kind feature that can make it different. So get creative. You may have already sketched out that one-of-a-kind feature. This is one of my client brands. This is actually one of my very first ones when I started my 2-week design process. Emily Gerald was my guinea pig. And she does babies, bumps, and birds photography. And so we kind of went off of a storybook theme. She loved Beatrix Potter, and so we chose that storybook text. And at first, we didn't have the ducks here. It was just the text here. But that was a little bit boring, and we wanted it to be more memorable and more distinct. So I went in, and in Illustrator, I drew out these little ducks. And she still uses this brand to this day, and I absolutely love it. She's even taken the ducks now and had fabric made for little blankets, and she gives it as client gifts, and they have the mama duck and the baby ducks on it. It is absolutely precious. But the ducks make her brand distinct. Even if people now who are familiar with Emily's brand were just to see the ducks, apart from it saying Emily Gerald Photography, they would know it was her brand. So that one distinct feature helps set it apart. So think about that as you're designing your logo. And Bridget, you asked if I purchase fonts myself or bill clients. I bill clients. So if it's a font that's going to be extra, usually I try to use free fonts or fonts that aren't super expensive. But yes, they have to purchase the font, and I'm upfront with them about that from the get-go. Great question, though. All right, number 5 is to experiment with color. I usually recommend, even back here in these drafts, before I added the little bit of color in here, I do it all in black and white. And the reason for this is because I don't want color to be a distraction from the overall form and composition of the logo. So I highly recommend that wait until you have designed the logo and gotten the composition right to then go in and add color, because it can be a distraction. So you can go in and then come up with some color variations. This was a recent project. It was last fall that I did for a client full circle photo project. And we came up with it in black and white first. I wish I had put that in these slides. But it was just black and white. All the text, all the little graphics here were white, and then the background was black. And once she approved it and liked that concept, then I came in with color based on her inspiration board and came up with different color options. We ended up going with this green option, but she also used this on other collateral items as well. So Start in black and white first, just focus on the form and the composition, and then go in and add color. It's really tempting to just add color straight from the start, but I promise you'll come up with a better result if you just focus on the composition first. Number 6 is to consider variations. So a lot of times, like with, I'll go back, Emily Gerald, this works really well for the top of her website, but when it comes to fitting it into a square and sizing it down, like we talked about, scalability, this shape for the logo, the composition, doesn't work extremely well. So I usually come up with a secondary logo option. So I have an example of this as well. Reveille & Co. was another one of my clients, and this was her primary logo, but it doesn't, I mean, it does fit well vertically, and it fits well even within a square, but when it comes to horizontally, we needed another option. So when I'm designing logos, a lot of times I'll keep in mind how I can break it apart and use it to simplify it and create other logo variations. So in this one, we were able to easily pull it apart and just use this. This fits perfectly in a circle or a square. It works great for a profile image on Instagram or on Facebook. Works really well for stickers and packaging items, even for a stamp. The R works really good for a favicon up at the top of the screen. You know, if you go to a website and right on the tab, right on the tab, it has, you know, a logo mark. That's where we put the little R, and then we could break it apart too and just use this text down here instead of using the full logo mark. So that's what I would recommend. Think through logo variations. How can you simplify it so that you have a more versatile brand and you're able to use it on all sorts of ways and all sorts of collateral items on your website? Consider that. And Natalie, you asked, how do you present your logo designs to the client? I do it in stages. So at first I do the primary logo in black and white. And then I come up with the color versions. And once they approve those, then I do the alternate logo variations. Sometimes I'll do all the logo variations in black and white before adding color, but it's in stages. Usually the stages that I've just shared with you. You're welcome. And then 7 is always to revise. Step away from it for a little while and then come back to it again and see if you can revise it and make it even simpler. Ask other people too, get other opinions on it. I recommend getting it in front of as many people as possible to see what they think, and people who are familiar with your industry, people who have good taste as well, but get it in front of people and get feedback on it, especially people in your ideal client or customer audience. Get their feedback on it and see how it resonates with them, because it's really important that your logo appeals to the right people. Going back to that Kate Spade and ESPN example. So always be revising. Shay, you asked if I present multiple design options or just one logo option. I present 3. And I never present a logo option to a client that I don't love, because I've noticed that if I just put one on there and I'm like, it's okay, they won't choose it. They choose it every single time. So don't do that. I go with 3 that I'm really confident with. And I do that because I want their feedback. They know their brand better than I know their brand. They know their ideal client better than I know their ideal client. So I always explain my rationale behind the design decisions I made for each logo option and try to educate them. But a lot of times they have some really great feedback during that process. All right, some do's and don'ts of logo design before I get to more questions. We'll start with the don'ts so we can end on a happy note with the do's. Don't switch up your brand every other year. Switch up your logo every other year. Again, you want to create consistency. You want to create brand recognition and memorability. And if you're always switching it up, you're not going to create that recognition with your audience. It's hard, especially as creatives. We want to switch up colors and we get bored with it. But I promise you, you might be bored with it, but other people will not be bored with it. You can also get creative with patterns and icons and that sort of thing, smaller changes, but don't switch up your logo every other year. Make small adjustments to it. Don't imitate. I said this in the last Ellechat. Don't pin other brands. Don't look at other logos when you are trying to create your own logo, because even subconsciously it will get in your head and you'll end up copying. I know from experience it's really hard to shake one of those ideas if I get it in my head. So I highly encourage you, don't look around at other logos. Hide away with your sketchbook and your inspiration board and just go to town coming up with new concepts. You will be so thankful you did when you land on a one-of-a-kind result for your logo. Don't be too literal. I know the Food Writers Guild, it was writing and food with the spoon, but you don't have to be super, super literal. So you can hint at it subtly with things. So try to get creative. You don't want something to be too abstract to where it doesn't make sense, but you also don't have to be super literal. With Bloom, we use the flowers behind the bee for the logo, but that was more from a creative perspective. All I'm saying, I wish I had a better example here, and I had some off the top of my head, but you don't have to be super, super literal. For example, you don't need to have a camera. If you're a photographer, you don't have to have a camera in your logo. You can get creative with it. All right, and don't go crazy with fonts. Keep it simple. If you have kind of a hand-lettered font or a font that's a little more distinctive, you might want to go with some fonts that aren't so distinctive, either in your tagline or across the rest of your brand. But don't go crazy with fonts. But do define and research your audience. Always keep them in mind as you're designing your logo. You want it to attract the right audience. So you need to know who that audience is. And hopefully, if you've been participating in the brand challenge, you've done that groundwork already, and you've had that in mind through every step of the process. But it is an important part of the process. Don't just create a logo based on what you like. Create a logo that your ideal audience would like. Do strive for something different. Don't just do a hand-lettered logo because everybody else out there is doing a hand-lettered logo. Do something a little more clever and creative. Don't be afraid to break the mold. Strive to do something different, maybe that hasn't even been seen before. That would be great too. If you think about the most memorable brands, they're memorable because they're probably different than other people's out there. So I encourage you to do something different. Do sketch out ideas. I can't stress that enough. Don't skip over that part. Again, you don't have to be an artist to do it, but sit down and just sketch out ideas for your logo. Do pay attention to spacing, composition, and negative space. So I always say that good logos should kind of fit together like a puzzle piece almost. If I go back to Christina Fox, let's see, here, you can see it kind of fits together. The F kind of swoops up, it's on a slant, it kind of fits together in that way. That's composition. It should kind of puzzle piece together. This too, even though it's stacked, the composition works. The spacing is equal. You need to think about these things. Space between the top of the L and the ducks is the same between the top of the bottom of the Y in photography. So consider that. Spacing, negative space is just as important as the subject. So consider that. Where was I? Here we are. All right, so do pay attention to spacing, composition, and negative space. Do get feedback from others. I mentioned this a moment ago, but get others' feedback on it, especially those in your ideal audience. And the reason for this, it's not pulling up here. The reason for this is because, has anybody ever seen Jenny's Ice Cream, the logo for that? Let me know if you have in the comments. I'm going to share my screen with you again so I can share with you this logo. Let's see here. Sure have. Natalie, do you know where I'm going with this? Let me pull up. Can you all see my screen? Hopefully you can. Jenny's logo. And I'm not going to say exactly what it looks like because it's a little inappropriate, but had they asked a bunch of people what this looks like, they might realize that it doesn't necessarily look like it says Jenny's. They might use a capital J. I know it's a funny example, but it drives me crazy every time. Every time I think, why did they do this? It looks like a terrible word. So just keep that in mind. Maybe if they had asked more people for feedback, they would have seen that. I know for a fact that I'm not the only one who has noticed this. So yeah, a little humor there for you, but make sure that you get feedback. I've also heard stories in design school. There was another hilarious story where the negative space of a logo wasn't very lovely, and so just consider that too. It's always good to get another pair of eyes on your work. All right, so I'm going to answer questions now. If you have any questions, feel free to add them to the questions section. But Hannah asked, do you have let's start over. Do you have any advice on how to use a hand-drawn logo? What are the logistics involved on transferring what's on paper to a usable graphic for your website? I'm an artist and I'd like to show my creative side through my logo. I love that, Hannah. So I would recommend, and you said you don't have Photoshop or Illustrator, which does narrow down your options. And if you are a hand letter or creative, Photoshop or Illustrator could really come in handy for you. Even if there's a monthly subscription to Adobe Illustrator, so even if you just got it for time to do your brand, but I have a feeling you're going to come across other needs as you create the rest of your brand, it's really, really simple to go into Adobe Illustrator. If you scan your work in, or even take a high-res photo of your logo sketches, you can take it right into Illustrator. There's a tool called Image Trace, and sometimes that's really helpful and can get a really good result. It'll trace your image in a sense and vectorize it, and you can go in and make tweaks. Or you can go in with the pen tool and trace over the lettering, as long as it isn't a ton of lettering, and that's really easy to do as well. So that's what I would highly recommend doing, especially Illustrator, because so with logos, like I said, with scalability, a logo needs to be really small, or it needs to be blown up really large. And there are two types of images. If you take a photograph, which is what you would use a lot in Photoshop, you're dealing with what's called a raster image that's made up of pixels. So if you zoom in on that photo or any photo, you're going to see boxes of color. And what can happen is if you try to blow up your logo and it's in a raster image like a JPEG or a PNG file, it will only blow up so huge before getting really grainy. If you use Adobe Illustrator to create your logo, and let's start over there. It works with vector images, and vector images are made up of algorithms, so and mathematical equations. So you can zoom as far as you want into infinity, and it's not going to lose any quality. You can blow it up huge, and it's not going to lose any quality, which is a big difference between Illustrator and Photoshop. Long story short, I would highly recommend pulling it into Illustrator and vectorizing it there. Even if it's just for a time, you can purchase a monthly subscription to Illustrator and do it there. Or you can hire someone who does know Illustrator and who could vectorize it for you. Great question, though. Jessica asks, do you create all of your logo elements, or do you purchase any prints or elements from a place like Creative Market? I try to create all of my logo elements. A lot of times, oh, and you already said a free trial that Adobe offers. That would be super helpful too. Thank you for saying that. Yes, I create all of my logo elements. I try to draw them, and if it's outside of my realm, so I try to also play off of my or utilize my clients' creative talents too. So with Bloom, one of the founders of that workshop is also a photographer, and so she had a photo of, or she had a couple photos of different bouquets, and I grabbed those photos and used them actually for the logo. I don't necessarily recommend pulling from a place like Creative Market, just because somebody else can purchase those same elements too, and you want to create a distinctive logo. If you find a really great pattern or something like that that you want to use on collateral images or collateral files, feel free to do that. But for your logo itself, I would try to create them all from scratch. All right, great question. Susanna asks, what is the best way to go about creating a logo? I tried to make one in Illustrator and gave up when I couldn't figure out how to save it properly, etc. Again, I'm really biased, but I work 99.9, actually 100% of the time with design work, all in Adobe Illustrator. And if you know how to use it, it makes it a lot easier to go about saving it and using it for collateral items and all of that stuff. I actually have a class coming up, and I put the link, a big green button to it. I've taught a course on Adobe Illustrator. It's coming up on 5 times. Started the course almost, I guess it's been 2 years ago now. And walk you through how to not only use Adobe Illustrator, but also create a logo and customize a logo, create website buttons, create an inspiration board, create a multi-page PDF document. So all of that is covered in the course. I teach you how to save things properly. So if you want to sign up for the waiting list, any of you tuning in, I'll be sending out a special offer next week. So be sure to join the waiting list there through that button. But I would highly recommend using Illustrator. There are also a lot of tutorials out there, especially for saving it properly. But that's what I would recommend, Susanna. All right, Jessica said, how to cover some creative block when trying to create 3 logo options to present to a client. Whew, I know the struggle all too well. And it's always the hardest. The third logo option is always the hardest to create. I would recommend filling up 3 pages of sketches at the very beginning just to get some good ideas. I also found that my environment also plays into how creative I am sometimes. Sometimes I need to hide away in a coffee shop with my favorite drink and just sit there for a little while, turn on my favorite music, turn on a new Spotify station or something and just get in the zone. And sometimes I just have to put a time limit on myself and just push through it. Sometimes if it's down to crunch time, I can become a lot more creative too. And it might be helpful, Jessica, for you to partner up with some other designers and ask for feedback. So I have a couple friends who I can reach out to and just say, hey, look at this. Can you think of any other creative options just to help me? Or which one is your favorite? Or just to get some encouragement and support to keep pushing through it is often helpful as well. If you all have any ideas or ways to become more creative too, or beat creative block, feel free to mention it in the comment section. All right, one more. Well, it's actually, I have 6 minutes. Okay, we might be able to get through a few more. Cynthia says, is it okay to use commercial fonts or should you hand create your own? It depends on what kind of look you're going for. Some people want the more hand-drawn logos, and so you might decide to create your own. My personal style, I tend to use a lot of fonts, and so I'm all about that. I just need to check the licensing requirements for the fonts and make sure that I can use them for brands. Some of them won't allow you to do that. But I say it's okay to use either. It just depends on what kind of look you're going for and what the style of your brand is. Teresa asks, how many different versions of your logo should you have? A vertical and a horizontal option? Should you have a logo type and a logo mark? Do you have both a logo mark and a logo type? What are the rules for using them together and separately? I like to come up with a system. So I like to have one option. Usually I have a horizontal option that works well at the top of websites and saves space on the top of websites too, because everything is so mobile now. And then I like to have one version that fits well in a square. So at least 2. Sometimes you might come up with another logo mark that might be a little bit simpler, just like the Reveille & Co. example that I shared with you. And then come up with a system for how to use them. You know, if it's in a horizontal space, you know, at the top of a workbook or on the top of your website, then you use that horizontal logo. If you are using it for something really small, or you're using it for a profile photo or something like that, use a square image, or use that square option. So that's how I would go about it. It just depends on what your primary logo looks like and what the format of it is. But that's what I would recommend. Sarah asks, how long does it take you to design a logo from start to finish? Whew. Sometimes it depends on the logo I'm trying to create. Including the inspiration board, it can take quite a while. The inspiration board sometimes takes me 3 hours by the time I find the images, save them, organize them on my artboard in Adobe Illustrator. And then sketching can take a few hours as well. Digitizing can take a few hours. So I would probably say 10 to 15 hours, maybe a little bit more. My whole design process, I have it written out in a Trello board, including website design, is 52 hours, 55 hours and 20 minutes. But that's not all logo design. It's also collateral design and website design. So I'd say 10 to 15 hours. Great question, Sarah. Elizabeth says, how would you go about designing a logo for your personal website that serves as your portfolio? I would go about it the exact same way as the steps that I just shared with you. A lot of times when you're starting out a business or a portfolio, just like with me and Ellen Company, I had no idea that it would expand into courses and webinars and any of this. It just, I'm now able to build on my website. It keeps changing and evolving. So you never know what your online portfolio, your personal website could turn into. So I would treat it professionally and go about the same process for designing your logo, Elizabeth. All right, last one. Amber says, I am designing a logo for a brow salon at the moment, and I'm struggling with the inspiration part, mainly because I want it to be as original as possible. I don't have any images to work with either. Have you ever had to design a logo with very little inspiration to work with or images to work with, and how did you overcome this? Sometimes I also look at imagery. So when I think of brows, I think of the brow shape. Sometimes even apart from the inspiration board, I'll look at like icons and things like that to start getting ideas for something along those lines. I would recommend pulling together images. Even if you want it to be original, go into Pinterest and pull images. Don't pull other logos or other brands to keep you away from copying or even subconsciously getting other logos in your head. But I would pull those images and start with that inspiration board. I hope that's helpful for you, Amber. And one more, I'll do it. Liz asks, what other programs do you utilize most often other than Illustrator? For design-wise, I only use Adobe Illustrator. I could use Adobe InDesign for PDFs, and I could use Photoshop for images, but I can honestly say that I don't even have them downloaded on my laptop right now because they were taking up too much space and I didn't use them often enough. Everything that you see, all the graphics you see, everything on my website, literally everything for Ellen Company, with the exception of the photos that I have done, are all through Adobe Illustrator. So it goes to show you just how versatile it can be. So if you want to learn more about it, please feel free to join that waiting list. Like I said, this course is only offered once a year, and registration will open March 7th through March 10th. So feel free to sign up for the waiting list, learn more details. I hope that this Ellechat was really helpful for you today. If you tuned into both, thank you for tuning into both Ellechat's and listening to me for an hour and a half today. I hope it was really helpful for you, and I would love to see you in another Ellechat soon. Next week, I have a dear friend and designer joining me, Melissa Yeager, to talk about how to put together a brand style guide. So be sure to go to ellencompanyddesign.com/Ellechat to sign up for that, or you can go through my profile on Crowdcast and sign up for it that way as well. It'll be a lot of fun. Thank you all so much for tuning in today, and I hope to see you in another Ellechat soon. Bye, guys.